Hi there, and welcome. I'm so glad you could join me today as we explore some really exciting topics together in this space. Learn smarter and learn faster with Bookopia. And now, let's begin.
Welcome to The Debate. Our focus today is on the underlying mechanism of sustainable self-improvement, and we're drawing from the foundational material Atomic Habits, Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results. The core tension in the work is between two really powerful but distinct ways to achieve great results. This is especially true for people in, high-demand fields like business or academia. The question is, should we prioritize optimizing the world around us or transforming the self within us?
Exactly. And the central question for our exchange is this: is sustained personal and professional transformation primarily achieved through, say, the meticulous reduction of environmental friction and automation designing foolproof external systems, or is it achieved through these profound identity shifts and the motivational reframing of our internal beliefs?
And I'll be arguing that designing an environment that makes good habits easy, even unavoidable, is the most reliable and pragmatic path to success in our very demanding modern lives.
And I'll be arguing that while making things easy is highly effective for getting started, without anchoring those behaviors to a new, empowering identity, well, those structural changes eventually just collapse. The actions become a series of chores, and the internal psychological shift is really the necessary engine for any true, lasting transformation.
Okay, so let's start with the cold logic of human behavior, especially when we're talking about the relentless demands on students and executives today. The core challenge of daily life is not a lack of inspiration, it's simply overcoming friction. We know this. Human behavior follows what the book calls the law of least effort. We naturally gravitate toward the option that requires the least work, either physical or mental. In a world with infinite choices, relying on sheer willpower, which we all know is an exhaustible resource, is just a path to guaranteed failure. Therefore, the only efficient strategy for consistent performance is to engineer your environment so the required behavior is the default. And we see empirical proof of this. Think about that hospital cafeteria study. Just by making bottled water obvious and accessible right next to the cash registers, sales increased by almost 26%. That's a system that works on autopilot. It required zero internal motivation, zero education, nothing from the consumer. And this is critical for a business leader or a student. When they need 2 uninterrupted hours for deep strategic planning or to write a dissertation, they cannot afford that mental fatigue. Our non-conscious mind, it runs the show. It guides us into old patterns before we even realize what's happening. So our effort is best spent optimizing the environment, making cues for good habits obvious and bad habits invisible. The system is passive, it requires no active management, and it frees up the mental space for creativity essential for high-level productivity.
Okay, I see why you prioritize efficiency and the law of least effort. I do. And reducing friction is without a doubt useful for starting a habit. However, systems alone fundamentally neglect the crucial element that ensures habits persist through difficulty, and that is identity. As the source material points out, changing habits is challenging because we often try to change the wrong thing. We focus on the outcomes or the process, not the underlying belief system. True transformation, real transformation, requires changing the beliefs that drive the action. Let's look at the story of the entrepreneur Brian Clark. His problem wasn't a complex system failure. It was a deep-seated nail-chewing habit. The system, creating a physical barrier, it always failed until he invested in a manicure. Now, this wasn't about reducing friction, it was about generating pride. He shifted his self-image from "I want to stop a bad habit" to "I am the type of person who properly cares for my nails." That is an identity shift. The ultimate form of intrinsic motivation is when a habit becomes an expression of who you believe you are. So if a student holds the identity, "I'm bad at rigorous academic scheduling," or a busy executive thinks, "I'm always late for deep work," that deep-seated identity will subtly, continuously sabotage any external system you try to implement. That internal pressure to maintain the limiting self-image will always, always trump the external pressure. So the path for that student or that businessman must begin with the question, Who is the type of person who achieves this goal and then build habits consistent with that new identity?
That's a powerful argument for the necessity of belief. But I have to question the reliability of relying on subjective identity shifts, especially when you're facing the hard reality of long-term progress in professional environments. You mentioned the nail-chewing habit, which is a singular, focused behavior. But what about the systemic, complex challenges that an entrepreneur or a researcher faces every day? We both know that progress isn't linear. Any business person starting a new venture or a student learning a complex subject inevitably hits what the book calls the valley of disappointment.
Right.
This period, where months of work can feel completely wasted, the ice cube metaphor, staying solid right until that critical tipping point, that is where internal motivation fails most often. If a busy professional is relying merely on low friction to sustain a habit like disciplined studying or making 50 cold calls a week when there are no immediate results, that subjective identity shift you champion is the very first thing to falter.
I agree that the valley of disappointment is the critical testing ground. But that is precisely where the identity shift proves its value. If your core belief hasn't internalized that, I am a dedicated student who values learning over immediate grades, or I am a meticulous salesperson who builds pipeline regardless of the current quarter, then the system is meaningless. Making it easy to sit down to study is useful, sure, but the reason you endure months of invisible work is that deep internal commitment to your new self-image. It's the difference between temporary behavior change and permanent, resilient transformation.
I'm just not convinced that relying on the, frankly, fragile foundation of a subjective mindset shift is as reliable for high-stakes performance as leveraging systemic external mechanisms to bridge that motivation gap. Automation is the key here. The material cites the power of automating habits as one-time actions that pay off again and again, which completely eliminates the need for daily willpower. For the businessman struggling with financial discipline, automation means an automatic wage deduction for retirement. The money is gone before the choice to spend it is even presented. For the student struggling with focus, it means using a persistent website blocker. It's a structural solution. This echoes Alfred North Whitehead's insight, right? That civilization advances by extending the number of operations we can perform without thinking.
Automation frees our mental capacity precisely when we need it most, when we are struggling through that valley and need to focus on strategic execution, not self-discipline. And furthermore, when that identity pride isn't yet established, we can use external accountability. A clear habit contract tied to high stakes, like paying a trainer $100 if you miss your targets, provides objective enforcement that works when internal motivation dips. Systems and accountability offer a stability that identity just cannot guarantee.
Your examples illustrate excellent ways to leverage technology. I agree. But the moment that external mechanism feels too constraining, the identity that rejects the discipline will simply find a way around it. The student can delete the website blocker. The executive can stop the automatic deduction. The external accountability only functions as long as the internal actor agrees to the terms. We should be focusing on making the habit attractive, not just forcing compliance. And if those internal beliefs are the engine, then we have to discuss what happens when the external world throws supernormal stimuli, these digital hypercues, right into the engine room.
That is an excellent bridge because it leads us directly to a key challenge of modern life. Countering these supernormal stimuli. We have the brains of our Paleolithic ancestors, yet we face temptations they never encountered. And that's a key reason why structure is superior to mindset. Junk food, constant notification pings, short-form video. They are all hyperstimuli engineered to hijack our reward systems. They drive these dopamine-driven feedback loops into a frenzy that no amount of internal pride can consistently resist. Resisting them relies on limited willpower, which, as we've established, is a short-term strategy. The pragmatic approach, particularly for a student facing intense study periods, is making bad habits invisible. The inversion of the first law. I believe the highest leverage move is simply removing the immediate cue. Think of the immense professional advantage and executive gains by instituting a simple system. The phone is locked in a drawer in another room until noon. This provides 3 to 4 hours of interruption-free focused work. By removing the immediate cue, you circumvent the dopamine craving entirely, which is far more effective and less taxing than trying to internally battle the craving using sheer determination.
That's a compelling argument for environmental control, but have you considered that solely relying on making bad habits invisible means we never train the underlying prediction system of the brain? The brain is, fundamentally, a prediction machine. It's constantly guessing what action will lead to a reward. If we always hide the cue, we miss the opportunity to reprogram the brain to find enjoyment in the hard habits. And that's the necessary component for long-term self-mastery. This is where reframing becomes absolutely essential. Instead of viewing study sessions as a burden, using language like, I have to wake up early, we must actively engage a mindset shift. I get to wake up early, or I get to build endurance and get fast. This change in perspective transforms the emotional signal. We move from associating the habit with a chore to linking it with opportunity.
And that's foundational for a student to engage with difficult material or for a businessman to handle rejection. Think of the writer Ed Lattimore. He deliberately conditioned himself so that just putting on his headphones became a motivation ritual linked to focus. He actively associated a simple cue with the identity of a focused worker. To truly thrive, we have to teach the brain to crave the hard work, not just rely on a system to shield us from temptation.
I appreciate the goal of seeking self-mastery, but you're arguing for an inherently inefficient, high-cost psychological process when a zero-effort environmental solution is pragmatically available. I mean, for the person working 60 hours a week and raising a family, the argument for internal self-mastery sounds like just one more chore. Why spend mental energy on cognitive reframing when, say, putting the Wi-Fi router on a simple outlet timer achieves the same result, stopping late-night web surfing without consuming any willpower at all? My point is that we should automate away the trivial battles so we have the mental fortitude for the complex work that can't be automated, the strategic decision-making, the novel research. This isn't about avoiding mastery, it's about reserving resources for where mastery is actually required.
And that leads us to the final point, the pervasive role of social context, which is intrinsically woven into our identity. We are fundamentally herd animals. Our desire to belong is often a stronger psychological driver than our individual ambition. So, a key part of forming a successful identity is building habits that work for our inherent personality and cultural context. The most effective path involves finding a game where the odds are stacked in your favor. For students or entrepreneurs, this means leveraging groups where their desired behavior is the normal behavior. If an executive wants to prioritize fitness, joining a corporate culture or a gym where disciplined training is the shared norm makes that behavior attractive and effortless because it reinforces group identity. Running against the grain of your primary culture, whether that's a toxic office or a procrastinating student cohort, requires constant extra effort.
That internal pressure to comply with the tribe will frequently overpower the desired individual system.
I come at it from a slightly different perspective. While yes, selecting the right game is valuable, the core principles of universal systems and environmental design are essential precisely because most people don't have the luxury of choosing their perfect social environment. What about the student stuck in an unhelpful environment, or the employee in a high-friction corporate headquarters? A person who is, say, naturally low in conscientiousness needs to rely more heavily on environment design and external accountability to compensate. This isn't about choosing the right environment, it's about making your current imperfect environment function correctly for you. Moreover, systems thinking is crucial to maximizing gains regardless of your personality. We have to strategically apply the explore-exploit trade-off, spending 80 to 90% of our time exploiting what works, operating within a predictable system, and reserving 10 to 20% for exploring new possibilities. The disciplined businessman needs a predictable system to exploit success efficiently, freeing up time for exploration. The student needs a structured system to exploit proven study methods, reserving time for exploratory research. Genes and preferences only clarify what to work hard on. Robust systems provide the structure to execute that hard work efficiently, regardless of the social context.
That's a fair point on the universality of structure, but even that explore-exploit balance requires an identity that values both discipline and curiosity. If the core identity is one of rigidity and fear of failure, the system will never dedicate that necessary 10 to 20% to exploration. You can build the system, but the person operating it has to believe they're capable of innovation.
We've discussed how structural efficiency, automation, and friction reduction, the core of environment design, provide the foundational stability needed for long-term growth. This approach pragmatically manages our limited willpower by making the desired action unavoidable and psychologically easy, reserving our precious mental resources for high-value work.
And we have illuminated that while structure matters deeply, true transformation and resilience, especially in the face of that valley of disappointment, are ultimately rooted in identity. Unless the habits are attractive because they reinforce who you believe yourself to be, a shift from I have to I get to, the environment changes will just feel like another temporary, externally imposed chore.
Both efficient systems and an empowering identity offer powerful and, I think, distinct tools for navigating the intense demands of daily life and high-performance work in business and academia.
The listener is encouraged to reflect on where their own progress is most constrained. Is it by external friction in your workspace that needs a systemic fix, or is it by an outdated, limiting self-image that is sabotaging your best efforts? Finding that key constraint will illuminate your most effective path forward.